Good morning to everyone who is joining us for the Women in Arts and Media panel. This morning we have with us Mina Esguerra, Patricia Evangelista, Angel Velasco, and Tanya Yuson. This talk is about 4 women creatives in art and museum curation, romance, journalism, and film who will share their stories of independence and critical assertion against all kinds of censorship. Sa aking mga kababayan, malugod ko po kayong iniimbitahan na maupo para sa ating susunod na usapan. And for our German friends again, there are simultaneous German translation devices for you. They are at the back. Please do help yourselves. Today, I will introduce all of our speakers, and then they will have their talks. And then afterwards, we will have time for a very short Q&A session. With me on the stage is Mina Esguerra. She writes and publishes English language romance and contemporary fiction. Her contemporary romance novellas have won the Filipino Reader's Choice Awards and have been featured on NPR, BuzzFeed, the Seattle Review of Books, and more. She founded Romance Class, a community of Filipino authors who write romance in English, and since 2013 has helped over 100 authors write and publish their romance books, now read in 52 countries worldwide. She is also a media adaptation agent working with LA-based Bold MP to develop romance media by Filipino creatives for an international audience. This is Mina Esguerra. We also have Tanya Yuson. She is a founding partner and chief creative development officer of Base Entertainment, a studio based out of Jakarta and Singapore that develops, finances, produces, and distributes content for the Indonesian market as well as for the international market. She is the executive producer and writer for the Netflix original anime series Trece, Prime Video's Comedy Island for the Philippine and Indonesian version, and co-showrunner as an executive producer and head writer for Cigarette Girl, Indonesia's first Netflix original series, which debuted at the Busan International Film Festival and won Best Miniseries at the 2024 Seoul International Drama Awards. We have also Ms. Angel Velasco. She is a media artist, educator, curator, and cultural organizer living in Manila and New York City. Her experimental documentaries, including Inherited Memories, When Absence Becomes Presence, and Balikbayan, Return to Home, have screened in American, European, and Asian film festivals, museums, galleries, and schools. Her photography and video installations have been exhibited internationally in New York, Los Angeles, Bangkok, Singapore, Gwangju, and Manila. Her teaching career as a lecturer spans over 31 years in universities in Manila and abroad, and her publications include the anthology Vestiges of War, the Philippine-American War, and the Aftermath of an Imperial Dream, 1899 to 1999, co-edited with Luis F. Francia, Markets of Resistance anthology, and she was a recipient of the 100 most influential Filipino women in the U.S. This is Ms. Angel Velasco. Finally, we also have Ms. Patricia Evangelista. She is a journalist and former investigative reporter for the Philippine news company Rappler. She covers human rights, conflict, and disaster. Her debut book, Some People Need Killing, a memoir of murder in my country, an account of the Philippine drug war, was hailed as a journalistic masterpiece by The New Yorker. The book was released in October 2023 by Random House and was a New York Times top 10 best book of the year, a New Yorker and Economist Best Book of the Year, and was Time Magazine's #1 nonfiction book of the year. It has since won the NYPL Helen Bernstein Book Award and was longlisted for the Moore Prize for Human Rights and the Penn Galbraith Award, and it will soon be translated into 7 languages. She is based in Manila.
Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Mina Esguerra, and I'm a romance author from the Philippines, and I get to start. First slide, please. Hello. So, talking about, I was asked to talk about everyday practice as a romance author who happens to be a woman, and I actually consider myself successful. I consider my books reaching out to its audience. The audience actually knows and connects to the books. So that should be fine, right? But I also live in this world where I consider myself successful but not taken seriously. So that's probably what a lot of us feel in our different careers, and what will be the prevailing theme of my presentation. So how is someone who is successful not taken seriously? And it's all the combination of keywords, one or more or all, that define my career. I am a woman, a Filipino woman, self-published romance author. So at any point, that's a deal breaker for somebody. For a publisher, for a reader, for a retailer, for a prize, for a scholarship, for consideration and reading lists. Next slide, please. So in my introduction, my community was mentioned. I am an author. I've written and published 29 books. But in 2013, I've started a romance writing community. There are a lot of authors who are Filipino who also write in English. I shared with them in 2013 how I did it. It's a basic outline based on the 3-act structure. Anyone can do it. And over 100 authors have actually successfully taken the class, finished a book, and published something. So that's Romance Class. This is a screenshot of our current homepage on our site, where every new book being published by the author is added. We publish digitally because we write in English. That's something that we can do that not all Filipino authors can do, which is get at least very accessible or wide reach for our romance books immediately and through digital. Because of that, we get analytics. We know exactly where our books are being bought. And if we do not know through any other channel, we can do surveys. And based on our latest stats and surveys, it's 52 countries around the world. Not all of them are Filipino. The original assumption is Filipino diaspora or Filipinos abroad. No, not necessarily. So we are a case study for how our stories travel, just so you know. What are the books about? Yes, they're about romance, but I think the only way that a community can really last this long, and also for the books to have this impact, is for them to be about something apart from the romance. So we have decided as a community that our books will be about something, and it tends to be about inclusion, representation, who deserves love, who is beautiful, as simple as a 40-year-old female main character, as simple as a plus-size main character. We decide that that's what the book will be about. And then, of course, in general, what is missing in the landscape of romance storytelling. And of course, we're Pinoy, so we have kilig. Every book has to have kilig. Pinoys in the audience know what it means. If you're not Pinoy, but you like romance, you know what it is without knowing the word. It's that feeling you get when you experience something romantic. And that's something that we infuse. We love that as a culture, I think, and we infuse that in the work. Next slide, please. So I've talked about our books and what does it mean when we are successful as a community and we write what we write, but we're not taken seriously. We are actually, I would say, 99% women and queer authors. So the stats that I've mentioned, the active authors, the people who have written one book and then moved on with their lives, 99% of that are women. So if you ignore any of these books because of the keywords that I gave, because it's Filipino, written by a woman, etc., you have missed out on so many things that women want to tell the world about just because of those keywords. So interestingly, again, because it's romance, it is a fertile ground to tell so many stories about love, sex, consent, relationships, how people should be treated, divorce, so many things. And we are talking about all of those things. These are just a few of the things that the books are about. It might not be obvious to you if you're not a romance reader, but romance can look like this and be about all of that. It's because it's the story we want to tell and the world that we build. So that's just an example. So these perspectives, I mean, if you read romance and you read them as a kid, you know this, but then you also know that at a certain point, you are told to not read it anymore, right? It's not part of the literature we take seriously, and it's not part of what is studied. It's not part of what is given space. And that's why I made an effort to be part of spaces where people take things seriously and talk about this. Next slide, please. So what happens when we ignore romance and its authors? We miss out on, I think, important conversations that are just treated differently in romance than they would in other genres, because we don't stop at the suffering. We actually look for resolution. We look for how should we treat each other? How should we treat women, queer people? How should this be done in a better way? So we talk about all of it, and we also try to find the right words and the right conversations to give people. And I think that's what we're doing, really, in romance, is that we're providing conversations. There's a lot to unpack about how we write consent currently, and I think what we're trying to do, there's an article online, you can just Google it, and I said, I think what we're doing is we're providing the model for conversations about how to ask for something, how to get it, and how to say no, and how to accept a no gracefully. So we're trying to do that in our books. Next slide, please. Why is this important? Why am I making an effort to talk about it in spaces where it's not taken seriously and asking people to take it seriously? Is because we can still write it. In the Philippines, we are free to write a lot of all of these things that I've talked about, but the doors are closing in a lot of places. First, places where they are not allowed to write about these things, and also they have stopped purchasing these things because of the different intersections that we talk about that we are not encouraged to write about anymore for whatever reason. So, what can we do? If you're listening, if you care, and you can do something, open doors. And that's it for my talk. Thank you very much.
Hi. Nice to see so many faces here, and a lot of women power. Gonna have to bear with me a little bit. I'm getting a cold. I was trying to decide on how I want to focus my participation here, being an American-born Filipino, a New Yorker first, and how do I want to use my voice or voices, because I do so many different things. And before coming here, I was faced, perhaps like several other people here in the audience, with being here. I got some flack in New York and in Manila for participating in the fair. And I really had to ask myself about self-censorship, which is not uncommon for someone who's also a youth activist. And I don't separate anything as a conceptual artist, filmmaker, educator. The night before I flew out, a very dear friend who had passed away on Tuesday, and I had a bit of an argument about me coming. And I'd like to dedicate what I'm about to say to him, actually, because I feel that it is important to come to the table, as they may say. And being a quote-unquote double minority as a woman, and as a woman of color, growing up in New York and trying to surpass being pigeonholed as an Asian American or a Filipino, and trying to make the kind of work, I feel like this is also a wonderful kind of opportunity to be with these colleagues of mine. Maybe we could just put that first slide up. Okay, so I live by something that I call subtle subversion. everything I do is about that. And sometimes I'm not even aware that that is where I'm coming from. And this slide here is from an exhibition that I did at the Ayala Museum in Manila in February called State of Flux. And I was asked to, by a photography group collective, Photomoto, join. And when I curate, I'm very, very deliberate about everything. I learned how to curate as a summer museum guard at the Museum of Modern Art and understood a great deal about how people look at art, how people interact or don't interact. If they jump back because they think that modern art is scary, or they make comments like, my 2-year-old could do this. So with State of Flux, I was fabulously challenged because it's a lobby and it's all glass. And I thought, ooh, I'm gonna create this island inside the glass and draw, put forth who we are, the complexities of who we are. I invited 3 other artists who are biracial from the diaspora to participate. The focus of the exhibition was really about the state of flux within the Philippine Islands. And I left it pretty much up to the artists to explore the topic. But of course, admittedly, in choosing these artists, I thought a great deal about who are they, the mix, how many women, and it's a horrible thing if there are any curators out there or educators that have to put syllabi together, where you're trying to be very, very inclusive, but the extreme difficulty of time and how does one include when, in this show I had 26 artists and it was only up for 2 weeks. So I just wanted to read the experimental text that I wrote. And I want to read it because it integrates the issues. And so what it is a writing prose of the titles of the artist's works and the ideas that they were trying to share and we were trying to share. So State of Flux is 26 artists who are reimagining the Ayala Museum lobby as the main attraction. Your face, a camera, your island, our face, a camera, our island. I, we, you, us, they, them, he, him, she, her. I hope this finds you well. Exit, enter, a space for public art. A cavernous slate floor, island encased in glass. Recentering the marginalized. Turning point, the lobby. Beyond a space to meet, greet, gossip, steal a kiss. Wait, breaking cliches. To and fro. Tropical depression, man-made, national fragility. The truth must gradually dazzle. Land erosion, pollution, Paradise Islands lost. Tracing time. What you see is not just what you get. Flux, backtrack, liminal time, broken terrarium. Climate change is not a myth. Sidewalk, hula, rear window in the time of the pandemic. Art is photography. Photography is art. Astra, Bahag. Objects of desire. Oppression is someone else's freedom. Conflicts of interests. Gaul's dream. Gladiators' lament. Empire building and enslavement. Birds of prey. Land occupation. Fresh fruit of rotting vegetables. Utterances of defiance. Critical histories. Diasporic trajectories. Crying games. Empty apologies in the realm of political fakes. Protector, ancestral domain, indigenous rights, longing. Whispers on a mountain, a nation perpetually becoming. Rosas Pandan, the body is an island. Night watch, tribute to contradiction. Wave, migration of the mind. Puso ng saging, evocations. Even flow. In the eyes of the beholder, transport, waning traditions. See through, impermanence, see and mist. The photographic image can trigger remembering. Best available image, go. Beneath surfaces, listen. Linger. In between glass. So this image is what you go through when you enter the Ayala Museum from the front of the building, and it's all glass again. So this is a piece that Isabel and Alfredo Achillizan did of the development or the remaking of their studio, and it opened into this world. Next slide, please. This is a close-up of a piece that Manuel Ocampo, who, like myself, moved in and out of the Philippines. And this image, which I hope you can see, that comprises the painting, is a political cartoon from the Philippine-American War of an American soldier who you can see here, is carrying like a caricature of a quote-unquote Filipino, and we are Africanized, which is not a bad thing to be, but we were all clumped together in a certain kind of way of a colonization that created false identities for ourselves. And if you can see here, Manuel painted the archipelago rather satirically, and it's actually the archipelago made of cum. Okay, I'll just race through these because my time is up. So if you could just pop through the next 3 slides. This is Kiri Delena, who did an installation, and it's photography based. Next. This is a piece by Angela Silva, where she's looking at the migration of Filipinos to the United States at the turn of the 20th century and their documents. Next slide. And then this is a piece, 3 works by Kawayan de Gia, who's also using mixed media photography and looking at the heritage and the culture in the Cordilleras. So as you can see, I really tried to incorporate a lot of different aspects of being in a state of flux. So thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Tanya Yuson. So my company is called Base Entertainment, and that is based out of Indonesia and Singapore. But I myself am Filipino, so most of my business partners are Indonesian, but we also do content out of the Philippines, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But before I start, I just want to preface, because this was such a great panel and like a great group of women to be with. It had, when Karina asked us to do it, it started me thinking about the journey, you know, to where I am from when I started, like as a lowly production assistant. And I realized I always liked film. I come from a family of very strong women, which in the Philippines, it's a little bit not so much a surprise, because we are traditionally a matriarchal society, which is very different from a lot of other countries around even Southeast Asia. But I grew up not thinking it was anything else. Men and women had their roles. The women could be loud. The men were fine with it. It was fine. It was only until, and I guess, you know, being in Germany and all the talks about Jose Rizal, thinking about how when Rizal left his home country, he realized that, oh, a lot of the things he took for granted were not necessarily the same way somewhere else. So in my case, I spent a lot of time in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, working, because I wanted to know, okay, where is the center of commercial film necessarily, like the industry. And, Los Angeles, 90s, 2000s, like if you wanted to learn about the business and how it was, that's where you went. And when I was there, I realized it's a whole other system that is maybe not rigged for a woman and a woman of color. So it's so baked in, though, that you don't really realize it until I actually moved back home, because I always wanted to move back to Manila, and realize like, oh, the game is so rigged. The perspective is so towards that cisgendered white male gaze that there was going to be no room for women's stories or as an audience, at least for the US. So coming home, after having realized that, my interest, not necessarily that it was just stories for women, it's just that I wanted more variety than what you could see. So when I just started looking for stories that were interesting, one of the first things I came across was Trece, which is a graphic novel by Bajatan and Kajud Baldissimo from the Philippines, which we then were able to set up at Netflix. First slide, please. So this is Trece, the graphic novel, and that's the poster for the animated series. So in this case, it took, just as a brief journey to it, it took about 10 years to get it set up. Not necessarily because it was a story about a woman. It's just that for the Philippines, the landscape for cinema, the box office returns wouldn't necessarily sustain something that needed that kind of a budget. And then you cut to when Netflix starts coming into the region for the Philippines, all of a sudden we have a little bit more leeway, more space to kind of tell these other stories. And they proposed, instead of live action, what if you made it animated? And for us, like, that was a great idea. Next slide. So we did a lot of research. That's my business partner, Shanti, on the left. We basically talked about it at Mary Grace, which is like a great little restaurant in Manila. If you go, you should do it. Go there. But that lunch that we were supposed to have, and she's from Indonesia and I'm from the Philippines. So we were just supposed to have coffee, which turned into a 4-hour lunch, which turned into, what if we do this? Stories out of Southeast Asia, for our respective home countries and then for the rest of the world. And that meeting between two women evolved into putting this production together that spanned Manila, Los Angeles, Korea, and it eventually ended up on Netflix, which is a global platform. In that story about women, for Trece, which is great, because we also got asked this question, like, Trece works with a kambal, twin brothers who are basically her muscle, her henchmen. But there's never any question that she's the boss. Whereas in some places, there'd be like, is she qualified enough? Why is she the boss? Here it's like, no question. And for us, it's like, when somebody asks us this question, it's like, how come she has no doubts about where she can take this leadership role? And we all, even the writers are two guys, Zig and Mick, and then myself. We're like, that was never a question for us either. So we're like, oh, okay, it might be a question for something else. Next slide, please. So then the other, and I'll talk about another project that we did called Cigarette Girl, or Garis Kretek, which is also on Netflix. Now for Indonesia, which is a little bit more of a patriarchal society, this was also something interesting. Again, based on a book, again, a central female character. But by the way, we didn't just set out to do that. It was just for me and Shanti, hey, this is a great story. It ties in with Kretek is clove cigarettes in Indonesia. And while it's an unhealthy habit, and none of us smoked, by the way, who made this thing. Hem. And so, we're like, in this patriarchal society, there's a woman who wants to be a Kretek maker, meaning you formulate the flavor for Kretek. But no woman was really allowed to do that at the time. That's like the 1950s. So it's about her journey overcoming that obstacle and the ramification that it has. Next slide, please. So in this one, also at different levels, it is women-led. So the director is Camila Andini and her husband, Ifa Esfancha, with Camila's voice really being the forefront of the lead character, Jingya, and the visualization of what that means. And for them also watching it as kind of an outsider, working out like what are the women's roles going through the society, while also watching women lead this team was quite an interesting experience. So I think also the takeaway, much like Mina was talking about in terms of underestimating the female audience, I think there are certain territories that do that, but do it at your peril, because actually the female audience can cross over as well to the male audience. It's also much like that thing that the saying that female rights are human rights. So a lot of the issues that it tackles, whether it's education or where people are in society, that also carries over to everybody, not just for women. So the concerns feel more immediate, more, human into what we need as society, the connectivity. So we didn't mean to, but I guess Shanti and I are kind of drawn to those themes and those stories because we feel like it's not represented enough. And they do make like an interesting story. And then the next slide, please. And there are ripple effects. There's like traction, there's like reaction to it. For Trece, it's also partly like Philippine culture on a global stage. But there were some reactions like a woman who was not questioning herself. She's only questioning, what she needs to do as a leader, but not that can I be a leader or not. And then for Cigarette Girl, the fact that, a woman is leading this story about their past rather than a man. So, all those things and the response from not just women, but also men showed us that these stories are of interest. So, in the US where they're hesitant to put a woman's story on the screen, I think in Asia and other places, even Europe, they're not as afraid to do it. So, for us, it's more exciting because for me especially, there are more stories to be told, both for men and women. And I think that's just exciting in terms of going to the future. Thank you.
Hello. I won't be showing any slides. Instead, I'll be telling you stories. Is that all right? All good? All right. We all know the theme of the Philippines guest of honor appearance at the Frankfurt Book Fair. It came from a book, The Noli Me Tangere, written by Jose Rizal, who in 1896 was executed by the Spanish for rebellion and sedition. Imagination, he wrote, peopled the air. Rizal wrote it about a woman named Sisa, who was sitting on the stoop of her house, waiting terrified for her children to come home, and one of them didn't. The true and full line is this: imagination peoples the air with specters. It was night for a long time in the Philippines, and the specters that people the air did not require imagination. Terror peopled the air. When I was 23, news broke from south of the Philippines of a massacre. The facts were unclear, but the headlines said that dozens of journalists had been killed. I flew out the next day with a group of journalists, and we traveled to a small town, to a hillside, in a small town called Ampatuan. I'm going to read you a bit of an excerpt from my book because it was a moment that changed the course of what I did for the rest of my career as a journalist. I spent most of that day looking down, counting bodies, snapping pictures, measuring the distance between one corpse and another, noting the color and pattern of the muddied kerchiefs trampled on the ground. I saw a corpse fall from the teeth of a backhoe. The stench boiled low and thick. Newspapers lay over the broken bodies, fluttering in the breeze. The military commander said that recovering the bodies was like cutting through a birthday cake. A layer of soil, a body, a red car, more soil, then the bodies again, bloating bigger and bigger the deeper they dug. The circle of tape couldn't contain the crime scene, as more and more bodies were found, so many that I could drop to my knees over a pile of banana leaves to photograph the body beneath. There, just under the bright green leaves, the fat flies circling, a man's palm lay open in the sun with a scuffed silver watch still ticking away at his wrist. I looked up once and saw photographer after photographer standing on the ridge of the hill, lenses flaring, silhouettes sharp against the noon sun. Some of them had missed joining the convoy by minutes. They stood watch, an honor guard for the dead. I still saw them in the decade later. The image burned into my mind's eye as I found myself wandering across other killing fields and other places. That long line of journalists standing witness over the corpses of their dead. I wanted to stand with them. We're supposed to talk about practice today, but when you're a journalist in the Philippines, those pictures are burned into your mind's eye. The possible and the improbable conflate, and your work is informed by the specters of the dead. You worry about libel suits, and you worry about the risks to your sources, and you worry, when you let yourself, about whether the turning of a doorknob will mean the muzzle of the gun to your face. I don't like speaking much about security for journalists because it feels self-important, because whatever we face is nothing to what the families who risk their lives to tell us their stories face on a daily basis. Our privilege is to tell their stories, and the duty is to do it well. But they live with terror every day. We do not. But still, because we're talking about practice and we're talking about process, I will tell you this, that there is no greater threat to press freedom than death. It's very easy to politely talk about the freedom of speech and the freedom to publish and press freedom, and not think about how it was defended in blood for the last 2 years in Palestine, where the journalists slept to the sound of bombs and woke up to the sound of drones. More than 200 have been killed in the last 2 years. So I would have read you a proper excerpt of my book, but instead I'll read to you the words from journalists on the ground there, some of whom still cover, and some who no longer can. Here, from journalist Ahmed Halal, as reported by the BBC. A cup of coffee mixed with ground chickpeas or a glass of unsweetened tea might be all you can consume during an entire workday. We suffer from severe headaches and fatigue, unable to walk from the sheer hunger, but we still carry on with our work. Here, from journalist Shrouk Al-Alia, as reported by the Columbia Journalism Review. I was filming in the camps, and I remember an old woman telling me, "Consider me as your mom. I advise you to leave this camera. This camera is going to kill you." And I told her that it had killed my husband. Here is 28-year-old Al Jazeera journalist Anas Al-Sharif. "This is my will and final message," he wrote. "If these words reach you, know that Israel has succeeded in killing me and silencing my voice." Al-Sharif filed his last story in August. His obituary, as was the case for many Palestinian journalists, was prepared in the event of his death. "I have lived through pain in all its details, tasted suffering and loss many times, yet I never once hesitated to convey the truth as it is," he wrote, "without distortion or falsification, so that Allah may bear witness against those who stayed silent, those who accepted our killing, those who choked our breath, and whose hearts were unmoved by the scattered remains of our children and women, doing nothing to stop the massacre that our people have faced for more than a year and a half." I speak of this because it is not possible for any journalist anywhere in the world to talk about being free without thinking of our colleagues in Gaza. Journalism, press freedom, requires no national borders. Journalism is a war crime. But more than that, the death of a journalist means you don't just lose the whole person. You lose a witness. There seems to be a belief that journalists are meant to be objective. I'll tell you a secret that you should already know. We never are. We strive to be honest. We attempt to be truthful. We do our damnedest to be accurate and balanced. But we are never neutral. We choose what stories we tell. We decide what words we use. And we know the difference between an encounter and an execution, a murder and a killing, a target and a civilian, self-defense and genocide. When we talk about press freedom, when we talk about free speech, remember this: the dead do not tell stories. The dead do not publish. The dead do not investigate. I'll end with this, with Jose Rizal, whose name and whose work we celebrate here. He said, "Do not forget those who fell during the nighttime." Thank you for your time.
Thank you to our panelists for all of your amazing insights. We will open the floor for a couple of questions during this question and answer. I will kindly ask Ms. Angel to facilitate the microphone. Are there any questions from our audience? Yes, Ms. Maria Reza.
You're
can't not have
really
a
not going to
question.
leave me alone.
Oh my God. Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for everything that you've done. So, one question for everyone: what is the biggest obstacle in your way today? I know, broad general. Well, you can say this.
Many of our leaders are the biggest obstacle. Ourselves can be, in very specific contexts, right? And the divisions that we feel or mindsets. And I'm just so happy to be amongst these three other women, because I think all of you can hear our diversity and the experiences that may not just be ours, but also through empathy, through struggle, through solidarity, that we are, embodying. And so I feel like the struggles that we face are not just as women. Absolutely, we're going to face that forever. But it's the struggle of being human, and how do we get to this place?
In my case, I work in a space that's very commercial. So, it's a business, it's an industry. But in that, I also know that part of that is reach. Because when you have something commercial, it also reaches much farther than a lot of, if it were something meant for a smaller audience. So my challenge, the thing that I want is more stories from different regions, from different perspectives. But I know, and as an audience member, I want to enjoy those stories as well. I think what ends up being the challenge, to your question, is kind of corporations, media corporations, that might, for a while I got a few through, but then will that be forever? So I take advantage of every opportunity that I can. But I also know the game that they have, but they can't ignore what the audience wants either. So in that case, it's also just encouraging audiences to kind of put even smaller individual stories out, building, for the Philippines especially, building that sustainability between content that we're putting out and content that people want to watch or consume or connect with. So I think that's the struggle, is just getting the word out there. And hopefully that changes sort of the corporate, because money is going to talk. And that's a way also to pivot the conversation.
So for my particular space, the biggest challenge is time for writers to be able to write. My class teaches people to self-publish, so we're not actually going through the gatekeepers, so to speak. It's easy to get the book out there, but the people that we've been encouraging to write the stories that are missing, they don't have the time to write. They tend to be women. They tend to be in charge of their careers, their families, everyone else in their life. They don't have time to sit down and write a romance novel. So something simple that maybe some of you can do here, anyone who hears this, is support the author the aspiring author in your life. Give them time, give them opportunities to actually be able to not do the other things that are demanding their attention, because there are so many stories that have not been told. And just in romance, I mean, Tanya and I are sort of fighting the same thing here to get a lot of stories across, but the people that we want to platform and make sure that they're telling those stories, they don't have the time to do all of that. So let's help them.
I feel like my mother's in the audience again. I think there's no time when journalism is more necessary than the time when the world is enormously fucked up. And the world is enormously fucked up. But this is also the time where people don't believe that journalism is necessary, that anyone can be a journalist, and thus all journalism should be for free. But the sort of journalism that is necessary, the one that involves process and practice, the one that requires you go door to door with 54 families, or you fact checked every line, or you talk to every possible police officer who could have been the killer but you're not sure. That sort of journalism is expensive. It requires resources. And very often people also don't want to read that kind of journalism, so you're not sure. So if there is a challenge beyond the personal risk many journalists elsewhere have faced, it's also relevance. Is the sort of work we do important? I think so. But how do we make people see that? How do we tell a story so that it matters? So that people don't say that dead man is someone I wouldn't have met. That's a drug addict. That's a drug dealer. How does that affect my life? So I think the job, not just for me, not just for journalism, I think for all of us, is to tell the stories so that they don't say, this is a story just out of the Philippines. What do we care? Or this is a story out of the global south. The story of the Philippines is the story of the world right now. It's just that we learned it the hard way. And we learned that when an autocrat says, kill them, he means it. And perhaps that's a lesson the world should take too.
I'm from our network, Babae, European Philippine Women's Forum in Europe. What I notice in this gathering is the scarcity of books about the ancient Babaylanes. And I'm very, very happy and proud to see all these strong women in this podium and other feminists out there. And my question is, do you really feel emancipated in your own world now? Because we're trying to tell every German here, you mentioned about Filipinas being in the matrilineal, not necessarily matriarchal, but we have this, the women is the commander in the family, and many German men don't believe that. So we're in this mission to have a differentiated image of Filipinas in Germany, particularly in Germany and in Europe. I don't have to mention the mob. There are different strong women, and this tradition of Babaylan, the Babaylan spirit, we want to keep on. So my question is, do you really feel emancipated? Have you reached that point? You don't need quota in the government or in your work of area? You feel secure in your work. Thank you very much.
I'll take this one first. In terms of whether female journalists are emancipated in the Philippines, whether we need affirmative action, journalism is female in the Philippines. I've never had a male boss. My old company, Rappler, attempted affirmative action for men. It did not work very well, which is not to say that women do not deal with quite terrible things when they go out in the field. The sort of threats we will get will always include rape, will always have name calling, will always say terrible things. But that's the case for many women around the world. But for journalism, I think we're doing pretty well in the Philippines.
For the Philippines around Asia has the highest percentage of women in positions of management. So I think that should tell you generally, and this also goes to the men we work with, is that they understand that the values that they bring to the table, they're cool with that. They know, they're chill, we're chill, it works. In my case, also for production, for the Philippines, you do have women running a lot of the managerial positions. I don't want to generalize, but generally, that's not a good thing. But it's the attention to detail, especially for production, that's very important. And you find that women have that, plus can compartmentalize and multitask. So that's just the practical application. Of course, there are men who can do that as well. But the women tend to be in those positions because they also think about, okay, this costs this much in the budget. Oh, but we have to make sure the crew eats here because we are going to end 2 hours overtime. So we can do the right brain and the left brain because they're also like, oh, this person's not doing well because they're having problems at home. Let's make sure this happens and this happens. So the women for production, they take all of that into account as well.
Like Tanya, I come from a very long line of women on my mother's side. So I grew up in a certain kind of do what you're going to go do. Take the consequences. If there can be a right and wrong, there are consequences to both and in between. So, I mean, as a curator, artist, educator, from New York, there are more and more women that are curators and museum directors, gallerists in the Philippines. And it's true what my colleagues are saying here, that in the Philippines, there's so many women in positions of power. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why I get a lot of strength from that reality. And I don't question my womanhood, so to speak, when I do the kind of work that I do in Asia or in the Philippines specifically. But there are, let's face it, ladies, it's a man's world, but it doesn't mean that we have to cross. I mean, it's just, we are in this really screwed up place. And I think, again, I feel like God, sorry if I'm being pedantic, but we all just got to come together. I mean, the bottom line is, and if you're in the arts, if you're in education, if you're a journalist, if you're a filmmaker, if you're a romance novelist, I mean, look at what we can all do. This is why we're here, right? This is why you're all here, because we're all part of this. So, yeah.
Thank you very
Yes, I go.
So for romance publishing and my romance community, I work mostly with women, but I'm also very aware that the books and the stories that we write are reaching out to people who are not in the same situation. And for romance class, by the way, not all of romance publishing, but for romance class, we have a guideline, an editorial guideline for all the books, which is agency and consent, especially for the female main character. It is baked in, it is required. You cannot call your book a romance class book if you do not give the female main character agency. And we hope that those stories reach the people it needs to reach, and that it helps change their situation. We know how young the romance readers are, and we know also the older people who find comfort in these stories. We're very intentional about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much again for joining us for this panel, and please help me to thank Ms. Mina Esguerra, Angel Velasco Shaw, Tanya Yuson, and Patricia Evangelista.
Babae ka, hinahangad sinasamba, ipinagtatanggol, ikaw na may walang laya. Ang daigdig mo'y lagi nang nasa tahanan. Ganda lang ang pakinabang sa buhay, walang alam. Walang magulat sa'yo laging nakasara. Harapin mo, buksan mo. Ibang ang iyong pagkatao. Babae ka. Kalahati ka ng buhay. Kung ikaw ay wala, saan ang buhay inuunlad? Ipagnilayan mo, kaya mo kong ipaglaban ang iyong karapatan at ganap na kalayaan. Pagpinto ng pagkulan, sa'yo ngayon ang sabungan. Harapin mo, buksan mo, ibang ang iyong pagkatao. Babae ka. Dahil sa akala ay mahina ka, halaga mo ay di nakikita. Isip mo man sa lakas ay kulang, ngunit sa isip ka piningayaan. Upang ang tinig mo'y maging mapagpasya, upang ikaw ay lumaya. Lumaban ka. Babae, may tungkulin ka sa pagpapalaya ng bayan na siya nating simulain.
Behind all the performances is Philippines Guest of Honor Music Director and renowned composer Maestro Chino Toledo. He ensures that each music piece provides another layer to the topic and theme of the discussions and talks under the literary program here at the Philippine Pavilion.